Wow.
I love having, he's the only man of my life.
The world knows Céline Dion as a ballad queen who seems almost impossible to shake her soaring voice, striking straight into the listener's heart like thunder turning every note into a moment that makes the heart fall still. Yet behind that radiance was a fragile soul always longing for one place, one person to lean on and call her own. When René Angélil entered her life, Céline clung to him as if he were the last beam of light in the darkness, seeing him as her center, as her entire world. Even when René fell into gambling, became entangled in rumors of infidelity, or was swept up in shocking scandals, Céline remained quietly behind him, enduring shielding and loving him so deeply that she forgot herself. Everything truly fell apart, only when cancer pulled René into a battle with no way out. On a night in January 2016 in a silent hospital room, Céline knelt down and held tightly to the hand of the man she had depended on for her whole life, a hand that was slowly growing cold. "Don't go," she whispered, a desperate plea that fate did not answer. When René breathed his last, all the brilliant light she had built throughout her career seemed to go out in an instant, leaving a queen standing alone in a kingdom that had just lost its king. The world called it tragedy loss, a shock. But to Céline, it was the moment when the entire sky came crashing down. Because from the time she was 12 years old, René was not only her manager, but also the first person who truly saw her, believed in her, and lifted her up before anyone even knew her name. When he left, she did not only lose a husband, she lost the heartbeat that had guided her, the only pillar that had helped her stay upright beneath the blinding glare of fame. Now, while enduring the excruciating illness at the end of her life, Céline chooses to begin telling her story, a story that opens in the light, crawls through the dark, and reaches truths that not everyone is brave enough to face. That journey from this very moment begins. Céline Dion's childhood began in a cramped house, where the laughter of a large family mingled with the sighs of poverty. There was no cradle, not even a bed of her own, only a small drawer just large enough for the body of a newborn baby. Night after night, she grew up amid the rustling sounds of more than a dozen siblings, among the smell of old belongings and the heavy breath of days marked by deprivation. Although her family loved one another, that warmth was still not enough to soothe the smallness and loneliness of a child who always felt she did not truly belong anywhere. That pain sank even deeper when she went to school, where she was called a vampire. Thin, pale-skinned with two front teeth jutting out, as if they wanted to escape her face. There were afternoons after school when other children blocked her path, spat in her hair, and yanked her uniform until it tore open. Céline ran home, crawled into the corner of a wardrobe, hugged a pillow, and sobbed. No one came looking for her. Her mother was still busy cooking for more than a dozen mouths, while her father was occupied repairing pianos for customers. She learned very early that no matter how loudly she cried, no one would come to wipe away her tears. At 9 years old, she was already standing on a table in the family's tavern, singing until her throat was hoarse in exchange for tips from customers. There were nights when the customers were drunk. They slipped money into the collar of her clothes and stroked her cheeks with hands thick with the smell of beer and liquor. She stood still, pressed her lips tightly together, and kept singing because she knew that if she stopped, the family would have no money to buy bread the next day. When the lights went out, she would sit quietly behind the curtain, hugging her knees and asking herself in silence, "Will there ever be anyone in this world who sings for me just once?" As the youngest child, she witnessed every storm her brothers and sisters went through, heard the sorrows of adults, while everyone assumed Céline was still too young to understand, and so she learned how to be silent very early on. That silence gradually became a habit, a form of self-protection, as though she was always afraid that just one wrong word might hurt someone or make someone leave her. As she grew older, that fear of abandonment followed her like a long shadow, stretching over the years that came after. Although she always appeared strong on stage, the past had shaped Céline into a deeply vulnerable soul, forever afraid that one day someone would turn away and leave behind an emptiness exactly like the shadows that had once vanished from her life. She loved with her whole heart, but precisely because she loved so deeply, The fear of being abandoned kept smoldering inside her like an old wound that had never completely healed. Céline was also the kind of person whose happiness was always bound tightly to the presence of someone else, someone gentle enough to listen, patient enough to stay, and strong enough not to let go in the face of the storms inside her. When she loved, she clung to love as if it were the last shelter depended on it, as if even the slightest distance would send her heart falling once again into the darkness that the years had once cast over her. From the time she was little, Céline believed that once she found the man of her life, she would love in a way that would make the whole world stop in its tracks. And when she found the person she loved, Céline was determined to give everything, her tenderness, her vulnerability, even the deepest hidden corners of herself that she had never allowed anyone else to touch. And then that day finally came, the fateful day when Céline met René Angélil. Only at that time she had no idea that from that very moment on, her destiny had already been quietly written in pain. People might smile mockingly, might whisper that Céline is too dependent, that she lives for him, but she would only gently smile and softly shake her head. In eyes filled with sorrow, he was not merely a source of support. He was the sky, the very air she breathed, the only reason her heart kept beating amid countless broken pieces, because the only thing she had ever truly longed for from beginning to end was love. They met on an afternoon that seemed utterly ordinary, yet it accidentally opened a journey that would last nearly 4 decades. At that time, Céline was only 12 years old, fragile, timid, her eyes always wide open, as if she were forever bracing herself for whatever hurt the world might bring. Meanwhile, René had already lived through nearly half a lifetime, carrying with him both failures and the last remaining hopes of a man still struggling to hold on to his career. The audition took place in a silence so deep that one could almost hear a heartbeat falter. Céline began to sing as if it were the only way to exist, and René stood motionless, completely captivated by the purity of her voice, a sound he had once believed he would never hear again. In that very moment, a quiet promise sparked within René. He would protect this little girl. He would open the doors that her family had only ever dared to dream of. And Céline, with the innocence of a child raised in poverty and deprivations, looked at him with absolute trust, as if looking at a father, a guide, someone who could turn a harsh world into a place safe enough to lean on. In the years that followed, they existed within the same orbit. René guided, protected, and supported. Céline practiced, worked tirelessly, and rose. He even mortgaged his own house to produce her first album, as if betting his entire future on a girl who did not yet fully understand the meaning of sacrifice. They were bound together through every journey, every recording studio, every small stage. And then amid the long nights preparing for performances, amid the stumbles and the moments of rising again, Céline began to feel something different, a vague tremor light as breath, yet growing clearer by the day. At 16, she did not yet understand what love was, nor did she know what dependence meant. She only knew that every time René nodded, her heart felt at peace. Every time he frowned, her chest tightened as though she had caused the world to collapse. She sang to make him proud, tried her best to be seen by him, and feared every misstep because she worried about disappointing him. That feeling was not romantic love. It was the instinctive clinging of a child who had never had anything to hold on to, now finding a single star to light her life. Over time, that dependence became deeper, more subtle, and more silent. On every tour, during long nights lying in cold hotel rooms, just hearing René's footsteps in the hallway was enough to bring her peace, as if he were holding the entire world together beneath her feet. She grew accustomed to his presence, a man who only needed to stand behind her to give meaning to everything in her life. Though never spoken aloud in her heart, René was the only person who made her no longer feel small or lost. As she entered her teenage years, Céline realized she had fallen in love with him, a love both pure and so intense that it frightened even herself. She loved René's calmness, loved the way he patiently followed her every step, loved even the warmth hidden behind his quiet exterior. But she also understood that the distance between them was too vast, too unusual, so easily turned into gossip. And yet every time she stood before him, all reason became meaningless. Her heart had chosen René long before she even understood what love was. That love truly began to ignite when Céline was around 18 or 19 when she was mature enough to recognize her own feelings. During a trip preparing for the Eurovision contest, they sat beside each other in a quiet hotel room, the yellow light casting a soft glow on his face, and Céline realized she no longer saw him as a mentor, but as the man who made her entire inner world tremble. On the night she won, they shared their first kiss, a clumsy, unfamiliar kiss, yet so burning that neither of them could turn back. "I have loved you since the first time I heard you sing," René whispered. Céline burst into tears, her tears falling onto his collar. She knew then that she had found what it meant to be home. But that love was not accepted. Céline's family especially. Her mother was overwhelmed with worry and opposition. A young girl in love with a man 26 years older than her, could that ever be right? Yet Céline, her heart already decided, simply shook her head through tears. "This is my life." That love became a silent battle between the heart and prejudice, between personal longing and the gaze of the world. But she did not step back because her love for René was too strong, too gentle, and too real. As her career began to reach international heights, they chose to keep their relationship hidden. For 5 years, everything remained wrapped in silence. On stage, she called him Mr. Angélil. Behind the curtain, she called him Mon Amour. They met in discreet hotel rooms, held hands under dim lights, afraid that even the slightest touch might reveal everything to the world. Her mother Thérèse cried every night, begging her daughter to come to her senses. But Céline would only hold her and whisper, "Mom, I only have him." Céline feared that public judgment would hurt René, while he feared that people would think she loved him only out of gratitude or influence. They loved each other in the quiet spaces behind the stage, in long stretches of separation, in fleeting glances exchanged before crowded audiences. Every phone call, every small note left behind became an invisible thread pulling them closer together. By 1991, when their love had grown strong enough to overcome all doubt, they became engaged. Yet Céline still did not reveal it publicly. She waited until 1993, when releasing the album The Color of My Love, to write in the acknowledgments words that moved the entire world, a confession that she had loved him for a long time and could no longer keep it hidden. The world might not have been ready, but her heart had been ready for a long time. Their wedding in 1994 unfolded like a fairy tale. Céline walked into Notre Dame Basilica wearing a gown adorned with 7 kilograms of crystals, a crown upon her head, her eyes fixed only on one man, the one waiting for her at the end of the aisle. When the priest asked, "Do you accept?" she broke into tears and answered, "Oui, pour toujours." They exchanged rings 3 times, once in Montreal, once in Las Vegas, and once within each other's hearts. But very few people realized that the first cracks had appeared much earlier. So small they were almost invisible, yet enough to quietly spread enough to cause her entire life to drift away from its original course. And when those wounds layered upon one another, interweaving into an invisible net that tightened around her, everything began to fracture in ways no one could any longer repair. The early 2000s felt like a cold, lingering cut running through the lives of Céline Dion and René Angélil, a wound no one could see yet, one that bled silently. While the lights of Las Vegas still blazed brightly, while concert halls continued to echo with a voice that could soften the entire world behind the scenes, a dark storm was slowly forming, gradual yet merciless. Rumors of missteps of dancers and casino staff, of shadowy late-night encounters, all of it became invisible blades, slicing into the image of a couple once thought unshakable. Then in 2002, a lawsuit struck like a bolt of lightning, tearing across the sky. A woman came forward carrying her own painful story, accusing René of assaulting her in a hotel room in the year 2000. The complaint was filed, the statements dry and cold as metal, yet powerful enough to make many hearts tremble. No one knew what was truth, what was fear, what was desperation turned into accusation. Nothing had yet been clarified, but the mere existence of such an allegation on its own was enough to burn away the fragile peace Céline had been trying to hold on to. The press circled like a pack of hungry wolves. Tabloids overflowed with sensational headlines, stories exaggerated, stretched and tangled together between truth and fabrication. René denied everything, insisting it was a fabrication aimed at his money and reputation. But in the stillness of a dark room, one could not help but wonder, could a family withstand storms like this? Could a woman still sing about love when her own heart was surrounded by doubt and pain? Then the truth began to unfold in a way no one expected. The woman and her husband were accused of extortion, arrested, and later convicted. The allegations that had once shaken public opinion were now seen as part of a scheme. And yet the paradox remained. Even when part of the truth was revealed, the pain within those involved did not simply disappear. No verdict could erase the wounds that suspicion had already carved. There were whispers that years after the lawsuit and the extortion conviction, the marriage had once wavered, that there had been moments when Céline nearly let go under the crushing weight of pressure. Nothing was confirmed, no word ever spoken by those directly involved, only shadows lingering behind the image of a couple who seemed inseparable. And sometimes it is precisely what remains unsaid that tightens the chest the most. Because beyond the quiet ache of infidelity, rumors, Céline also carried another wound, watching the man she loved with all her heart fall into gambling. René Angélil harbored a deep private obsession with a habit that was hard to escape. Each time he stepped into a casino, he sank deeper into the addiction. Every card, every chip added more weight to the invisible burden on his shoulders. While the public saw the brilliance of Céline's performances, few knew that behind the scenes were glaring red numbers, silent debts René tried to conceal, bearing them alone in silence. Even after witnessing that pain with her own eyes, seeing René return from casinos burdened with enormous debts, Céline still chose to forgive. To her, it was part of the man she loved, a long-standing habit she accepted as something that came with him. Many sources and books suggest that René even used Céline's performances at Caesar's palace to repay debts. Each long-term residency contract, each night on stage, seemed to be both a success and a tether bound by an invisible weight. The casino favored him as a high roller, but that favor also meant that the Dion Angélil family lived on a fragile boundary between light and shadow, between applause and quiet anxiety. The truth is that René lost millions of dollars, yet the figures made public were only the tip of the iceberg. Media exaggeration only made everything heavier, pushing their family into the center of public scrutiny. Outsiders saw only gambling losses or his addiction, but few recognized the pressure bearing down on their marriage, their careers, and the mental well-being of two people living between glory and suffering. And so it went on each night. Céline stepped onto the stage was also a battle of endurance, performing while silently straining to keep her family from the edge of financial ruin. René, despite being consumed by gambling, remained her husband, her manager, the man she trusted. Forgiveness and acceptance became an unspoken choice, a quiet victory in the face of tragedy. Yet in those rare moments of stillness, Céline still had to confront a sense of helplessness. The pain of watching the man she loved slowly sink deeper into the traps of chance. For many years, Céline Dion seemed lost in a maze of emotions with René, always at its center, and she never dared to step outside his embrace. She feared that if she left him, the world would become so empty that no one and nothing could ever fill that void, and who else could ever make her feel a love so deep? From the very first moment Céline met René at the age of 12, the bond between them was never simply that of an artist and a manager. It was more like that of a child searching for shelter and a grown man with enough power, experience, and influence to shape her entire future. To Céline, he was not only the one who discovered her talent, but also the only person who recognized her worth from the very beginning. That recognition planted the seed of dependence, one that took root so deeply that later, no matter how much it hurt, she could never break free. As she grew older, Céline became more aware of how vast and harsh the outside world was. Yet, amid all that chaos, René remained the one constant anchor. He made decisions for her, protected her, shielded her from pressure and the media. That dependence, quiet yet intense, made it impossible for Céline to walk away, no matter how much pain she endured. Deep down, she always believed that if she lost René, her life would collapse, her voice would lose its meaning, and her career path would fade into uncertainty. He was the one who had witnessed every step of her growth, every rise and fall in her life. and so her fear of abandonment became almost absolute. She could not imagine a life without him standing behind the stage lights. When rumors surfaced, when their shared life grew heavy with pressure, when gambling and emotional burdens weighed down the atmosphere of their family, Céline still chose silence. Not because she did not feel pain, but because she feared that the moment she spoke, everything would shatter. Her life had been tied to him for too long, so much so that their relationship was no longer just love, but like roots wrapped tightly around her heart. If she tried to pull away, there would be nothing left but blood and pain. She endured because the fear of losing him was greater than the pain of being hurt. That feeling was not merely love, it was also gratitude, the memory of a child once rescued from unfinished dreams. And so, whenever she thought of leaving, Céline felt as though she would be betraying her younger self, the little girl who once believed that René was the only person in the world who would never turn his back on her. That belief held her in place throughout all the years of her adulthood. Until René's final moments, Céline remained by his side, devotedly caring for even the smallest details for the man who had been bound to her entire life. That love was not only loyalty, it was a great flame burning in the darkness of loss, proving the extraordinary strength of a woman's heart. People call cancer a disease, but to Céline it felt like a silent sentence handed down by the universe at the very moment she believed she had everything. She could never forget the day the doctor announced that René had throat cancer. She froze as if a cold wind had pierced straight through her heart and left behind a crack that would never heal. René suddenly became so fragile that even a single cough made her tremble. From that moment on, the fear of losing him clung to her like a shadow she could not shake off. During the first months of treatment, Céline lived in a state between wakefulness and delirium. Every morning, she woke up with a sense of panic. What if today was the day he became weaker? What if one evening she returned and could no longer hear him call her name? She hid that fear behind a smile, but anyone perceptive enough could see the deep hollows beneath her eyes, as if she had just cried in the bathroom before stepping onto the stage. As René gradually lost the ability to eat normally, Céline became his hands, his eyes, and even his breath. She blended his food, fed him through tubes, wiped every drop of sweat from his forehead when pain caused his body to convulse. There were nights when René drifted into sleep under the effect of the medication, and she would sit quietly beside his bed, looking at the gaunt face of the man who had once been strong enough to make the world look up to him, and her tears would fall silently, without a sound. The most painful moments were when he tried to speak, but his voice was as fragile as a thread about to snap. Every hoarse sound emerging from a throat, marked by surgery, tightened her chest. She would lean in close, hold his hand tightly, and whisper, "I'm listening. Go on." But there were times when even then all she could hear was broken breathing, a silence that felt as though it would shatter her heart. When the illness returned a second time, then a third, Céline felt as though she had fallen into a bottomless abyss. She paused her singing set aside the outside world and withdrew into a small space that held only the two of them. She refused every appointment, every event, every stage light, as if all fame and success had become meaningless if the man lying there would no longer wake beside her. At night, she did not dare to sleep. She lay there listening to every breath he took, afraid that if she closed her eyes even for a moment, she would wake to find no warmth beside her. There were times when he woke and said he was tired, that he was afraid, and in those moments, Céline understood that the deepest kind of love is not found in beautiful promises, but in forcing yourself to appear strong so that the one who is slowly slipping away can still believe they have hope. On the day René weakly whispered that he wanted to leave in her arms, Céline felt as though her heart had been torn in two. One half begged God to keep him there. The other understood that he had endured too much pain and needed to be set free. She said nothing, only gently placed her hand on his cheek, kissed his pale forehead, as if trying to hold him back with every last bit of warmth left in her life. In those final months, Céline was not only a wife, but also a nurse, and the one who kept the family's flame alive. She cared for him in every smallest detail, changing medication, making sure the feeding tubes did not clog, massaging him when pain tightened his body, softly singing to him when he no longer had the strength to open his eyes. They no longer spoke much. They simply held each other's hands tightly, as if every squeeze was a whispered, "Don't go." Then on the morning of January 14th, 2016, the stillness in the room changed. There was no longer the faint sound of breathing, no more subtle movements. Céline knew immediately, even before touching him, that her world had changed color. She sat beside her husband's body, still faintly warm, resting her head on his shoulder as she had for 3 decades, but this time his shoulder no longer leaned back into hers. From that moment on, their love was no longer a private story, but a vow proven by an entire lifetime. When René fell ill, Céline left behind the spotlight to stay by his side, just as he had once stood behind her and lifted her up. When he grew weaker, she became stronger. When he trembled, she held his hand tighter. And in every one of those moments, even as the world continued to whisper about dependence or their age gap, she only smiled because no one but them could understand how long their hearts had been bound together. Their love began with music grew in silence, matured through opposition, and endured pain and illness to survive. It was not an easy love, nor was it a perfect one, but it was the love of two people who found in each other what the world could not see, a place to return to, a sky to breathe beneath, a heart to love without fear. After René left this world, Céline's life seemed to be swept into a cold emptiness that even she could not name. The first mornings without hearing him call her name, without a shoulder to lean on, made the vast house feel endless, as if every sound had been swallowed. And in that silence, she softly said to herself, "I'm still here, René, but I don't know how to go on." It was not a complaint, but more like the voice of a lost soul trying to hold on to the last remaining warmth. But before her tears had even dried, her 3 sons called for their mother. Céline had to wipe away every trace of pain and stand up, even though her body felt completely drained. She understood that from the moment René closed his eyes, his role had shifted onto her slender shoulders to be both father and mother, to be the pillar. And so each day she reminded herself to be strong, not because she wanted to, but because she had no other choice. My children need me, and I must be strong enough to carry both my part and their father's. In the first months after the funeral, she barely stepped outside. She devoted all her time to her children, eating with them, studying with them, putting them to bed, telling stories, holding them longer and tighter. Every time little Oliver asked, "Where is Dad?" "Mom." Céline's heart tightened, painful, sorrowful, helpless. Yet she still answered in a voice as gentle as the wind, "Dad is still here, in my heart and in yours." She forced herself to become the light, even as she herself was still lost in the darkness. While her spirit had not yet recovered, her body began to turn against her. Stiff person syndrome struck like an unannounced sentence. The spasms, the days when she could barely walk, the nights of pain so intense she could not sleep, made her feel as though life was testing her with its harshest trials. In 2022, Céline stood before the camera, her hands trembling so much she had to grip the edge of a table to steady herself. She spoke, but her voice broke again and again. The syndrome was slowly imprisoning her body. Sudden spasms, physical therapy sessions that tore through her with pain, moments when she tried to reach a familiar high note only to hear it shatter in her throat. She cried not out of despair, but because she still longed to sing, still wanted to live, even as her body betrayed her in the cruelest way. At times, Céline admitted that it felt as though an invisible hand was tightening around her throat whenever she tried to sing. And in the darkness, all she could do was break down in tears, whispering, "René, if you were still here, you would know what to do." Someone once asked her gently as the wind, "Céline, do you have any regrets? If you had never met those people, would your life have been less painful?" She was silent for a moment, then answered with a strange certainty, "Yes, but without those wounds, I would not be able to sing the way I do today. Every scar is a note, every drop of blood a melody. It was pain that taught her how to fly with tattered wings, and it was those very wings that carried her voice through every storm. And perhaps the most beautiful thing left after all that loss, is the resilience of a heart that was once shattered, yet still knows how to plant hope again. Céline wants to send a message to everyone who is following her story right now, even if you are not standing on a stage, even if there is no microphone in your hand, you still carry your own song within your heart. Never let anyone take that away from you. People may doubt, you may mock you, may try to extinguish the light inside you, but keep singing in whatever way you can. As long as that song continues to echo, they will never be able to defeat you. The days pass slowly under the sunlit skies of Las Vegas. The evening sunset gently settles over the small garden in front of the house, casting a fragile golden glow onto hair that has endured so many sleepless nights. Céline sits there quietly holding her youngest son in her arms, placing a tender kiss on his sun-warmed hair. Her hands still tremble, her legs sometimes still betray her, and her voice is at times carried away by invisible spasms. And yet that smile, soft and peaceful, says everything. It is not the smile of a diva beneath a sea of flashing lights, nor the forced smile meant to reassure the world. It is the smile of a woman who has walked through hell, who carries deep scars upon her heart, who has lost almost everything, yet still holds on to love and music to keep herself alive. If you have followed this story to its final lines, thank you for taking the time to feel a journey filled with tears, yet also overflowing with hope. And if you wish to continue walking alongside it, to listen to more, to live through stories that can touch the heart, please consider following the channel. Every subscription is not just a simple click, but also a gentle message sent to Céline and to those who are fighting every day. You are not alone.